What's up, everybody? Good late morning, and it is Wednesday, so it's time for our weekly look ahead at the upcoming college games that are of interest prospect-wise. You guys know how we do things by now, and you guys know what it's all about. However, before I get into this, I do want to say this is not a great week, I don't think. I'm not in love with the matchups this week. We've got some quality teams on a bye, like Michigan is not playing, so they've got a bunch of interesting prospects that we're not going to get to see this week. And honestly, a lot of the teams that have been of particular interest to me this season are playing on obscure networks like Clemson. Clemson's playing their game, I think, on the ACC network. Washington and Washington State are on, I think, Fox Sports 1 and the Pac 12 network. So it's not a great week. For one, I didn't see anything interesting tonight or Thursday night or Friday night or even last night. If you want to go back to some of the games last night, they're all maybe good games, but the only team that had any kind of a notable prospect to me was Syracuse, and Gadsden's out for the year, so not even them. Oronde Gadsden's out. So this is not a great week for college football matchups, I don't think. We don't have a super duper marquee matchup, I feel like, and if we do have one, it's not necessarily one driven by great prospects. So I did what I could. Excuse me. I did what I could, but it's not a great week for college football, in my opinion. So we're gonna jump right into it on Saturday, the 28th of October. 9 a.m. We get started with two games. This first one, I think, is actually one of the most compelling games of the day. Not saying a ton, but we do have South Carolina, the Gamecocks, against the Texas A&M Aggies. And South Carolina, they've still got Spencer Rattler hanging out over there, playing good occasionally. Still going to be kind of interesting come draft time. Very interesting narrative there. And I like their tight end, Knox. He's really come on lately, and he could end up being a late round tight end that you take who makes meaningful contributions. So, South Carolina and Texas A&M honestly is a team we might need to pay a little more attention to. They've got two early day 3 type defensive linemen in Shamar Turner and McKinley Jackson who are likely going to be targeted by the Seahawks at some point, right? I can't imagine us getting through the draft without both of their names coming up quite a bit because they're both pretty good players, but they're not superstars to the point where they're going to be first or second round picks. You also got Bryce Foster, who could be a tight end of some value, even though he's obviously low on the priority list. He is somebody who I've taken notice of before. So for 9 a.m., that's about as good as you're going to get, along with the Florida State game on ABC. Florida State is playing Wake Forest, and that's a bit of a lopsided match, but you've still got Jordan Travis, you've got Jaheim Bell, and you've got still Jared Verse. Florida State has great receivers, but I don't think that's of any interest to the Seahawks. Those guys are just a little too good to be on the radar. They're going to be gone probably before we pick, period. But it's a good game to watch regardless. So that's probably about the best you're going to do in the early window, unless you have access to some of the more obscure channels. Like I said, I think Clemson plays at 11 a.m. on the ACC network or something like that. So if you have access to that channel, then great. But major network wise, I think this is about the best you're going to do. 12:30 p.m. Jumping ahead to the afternoon slate. This is the closest thing we have to like a marquee matchup, and it's not that interesting. Like, does anybody actually think Florida's going to win this game? I can't see it. Like, Georgia doesn't have Bowers, admittedly, right? Georgia doesn't have Brock Bowers, but they still get a lot going on over there that's worth watching. So you may as well keep an eye on this game. You've got Van Pran, you've got Stackhouse, Mondin Jr., Johnson, Dumas, and Bullard. Probably a couple other guys as well, like Tyke Smith you could throw in there. But I mean, Georgia is going to have a ton of guys get drafted in this upcoming draft, and everybody's going to have different takes on who's interesting and who's not. And Florida's not a terrible team. I just can't imagine them winning. And Florida this year doesn't really have, like, the only thing that Florida has that's even a little bit interesting is that Princely guy, the defensive lineman. Um, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, but Princely, their defensive lineman's okay, I guess, but it's not great. It's not what we're looking for in a marquee matchup. Another 12:30 game would be Oregon versus Utah. This is a really interesting game. Oregon, they look human. And Utah, they can't score, but they got a great defense. So you got to figure this game's going to be close. This is going to be a really interesting game. It's a 12:30 Fox. You got Nix, you've got Dorlish, you've got Birch, you've got other players on Oregon that may end up being interesting come draft time. Like they probably got some offensive linemen that are going to be day 3 guys. And Utah's got Brant Kuith, the tight end, and Cole Bishop, the safety. So that's kind of a marquee matchup for us because it's a Pac 12 game. But in terms of prospects, it's just okay, right? It's one of the best games of the day, which is not saying a heck of a lot. But it should be a good matchup anyway. And we also have another kind of interesting game at 12:30 ESPN. We've got Duke versus Louisville. Now, Louisville's good. They don't really have any prospects that I'm familiar with that I'm super interested in. Duke obviously has Barton Carter and hopefully Riley Leonard, but the fact that they're playing a good team in Louisville is meaningful. Now, this game loses a lot of meaning if Riley Leonard isn't playing and he's hurt, and I don't know what's going to happen. I haven't heard anything concrete about whether or not he's going to play. If he does play, is he going to be able to play well? But Barton and Carter are interesting enough on their own, I guess, and they're playing a good team, so that's always worth monitoring. Okay, 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. on ESPN, we have Tennessee versus Kentucky. Two quarterbacks who are fighting to be like day 2 picks, probably, in Joe Milton III and Devin Leary. So, both 5-win teams, both pretty good teams. This is going to be a good test for both of them. I don't think anything else need be said. You guys know I love Joe Milton, and Leary I'm not in love with, but he is a pretty good quarterback, and the Seahawks may not be able to invest a super high pick on a quarterback this year. A guy like Leary might be the best they can do, and there's nothing wrong with that. 4:30, a little bit later on NBC, we've got the Ohio State game, and Ohio State at this point may be the most prospect-filled team other than Michigan in terms of guys who I like as potential future Seahawks. Ohio State and Michigan are basically 1A, 1B. Ohio State, and they're playing Wisconsin. They're a decent team. Well, not really a good team, but a decent team, I would say. Cade Stover, Donovan Jackson, Tyleik Williams, Michael Hall Jr., JT Tumo-Lau, and Tommy Eichenberg. And Wisconsin's got Bortolini, the center, who I think could become kind of interesting as a late round guy. That's about it for the late afternoon window. And then we've got one game late, 7:30 p.m. ESPN, Oregon State versus Arizona. And that's a good game just in general because Oregon State's ranked. But Arizona also has Jordan Morgan, who I think is intriguing as a guy who could slide inside on the offensive line. And that's really about it for this week. It's just not a great week, I don't think. We don't have any matchups on the level of like Ohio State, Penn State. Michigan's not playing at all. A lot of the best teams are playing on non-mainstream networks. It's just a little bit weak, I think, but we'll make the best of it. The Ohio State game's pretty good. I guess the Georgia game could be good. Oregon, Utah should be compelling at the very least on a college football level. It'll work out. All right, see you guys later. Bow down to Washington and go Hawks.